Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
We'll pretend I didn't make the other mistake, right, John?
Hey, we all get second chances, Brad.
Yeah, except Marjorie Taylor Greene, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, that's a different story. Maybe, you know what? Maybe some of that house controversy could sneak into one of our top 3 stories today, Brad.
I don't know. We'll have to find out. That's John Combest, Combest, every single day for 22 plus years, right? 22 plus years?
Yeah, that's right.
22 plus years, he puts together a daily sort of synopsis of what's going on in the state of Missouri, political and all sorts of other things. He puts that on his website, johncombest.com. That's why I spelled Combest for you. And as the polka guy says, Combest, that's the way he says it. A little bit different pronunciation of his name. And every day we start out with the top 3. And today we'll do the country intro for John's top 3.
Time for the John Combest top 3. Top 3.
And here is aforementioned John Combest. John, good morning to you. Lots of stuff to talk about. Man, I got my notes this morning. You probably got your stuff.
We have so many, Brad. It was almost impossible to make a top 3 today, to be fair. And a lot of conversation online about the conversations that we had yesterday. Wentzville superintendent story got a lot of attention yesterday, and
you know
it
what?
was just hard to pick a top 3, Brad.
And you know what's interesting? We'll talk about that a little further down the road. But that what happened yesterday with the Wentzville superintendent has proven Dave Ramsey once again is correct. Okay.
Oh, he sure is, isn't he? You know what? She should dump some of that money into maybe 2 of the stocks that we're going to talk about in number 3, Brad.
There we go. Okay, we'll start it off with Casey.
And here they are in third place.
The topic of sports betting. We talked about it yesterday, Brad. You asked me what was happening, what the latest with sports betting was. And that was a timely question because today on johncombest.com, we have 2 stories that talk about the sports betting initiative. The first one, and the one that I would suggest folks read, is from the Missouri Independent. It's written by Rudy Keller. And he goes through the ballot initiatives, abortion. There's also a minimum wage ballot initiative that's circulating. But the one that we'll talk about today and mention today, Brad, is the one on sports betting. We referenced this yesterday. Brad, the name of the group wasn't on the tip of my tongue yesterday, but the group that wants sports betting in Missouri, Winning for Missouri Education.
That sounds like something Trump would put together, doesn't it?
Yeah, like almost an Atlantic City casino type thing, right?
Well, remember when
Rudy Keller has this piece up. Jack Cardetti is the spokesman for this effort. He's really, I think, piloting the ship here in terms of communicating for Missourians and organizing the effort. He, of course, led most recently the recreational marijuana / adult use marijuana initiative, and he's been deeply ingrained in the marijuana effort for a while. He formerly worked for Jay Nixon and a host of other Democrats. But this group, Brad, has accumulated in essentially all the signatures that they're going to need. So they're most certainly going to be on the November ballot. And I would anticipate that this passes. What do you think, Brad?
Oh, yeah, of course it's going to pass. I mean, once again, a syntax, it would be like saying, hey, do you want to have, whiskey at only $1 a bottle? People would go, yes, we'll do that. They're going to jump all over that deal. There's no doubt about my mind.
What I think was I agree. I think this will pass huge. What was interesting, as Rudy Keller points out, he went through the campaign finance documents, and in general, the leadership of the Cardinals is really quarterbacking this whole thing, and it's being entirely funded by the 2 largest sports wagering platforms, FanDuel and DraftKings. So, Brad, we talked about where the Wentzville superintendent might want to invest some of her money. And maybe FanDuel. And now, for disclosure here, Brad, I happen to own Flutter, which owns FanDuel, and I happen to own DraftKings as well. So, personal disclosure there. I am a little bit biased in this, but you know what? Those tickers could be out of my portfolio by next week. I don't love them, Brad. My opinion about stocks is like women, Brad. You can't love them and stay above them.
Okay, John.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm not going to touch that. I'm hands off on that one in more ways than one. Okay, but there's an interesting sidelight to this, and it involves a former Mizzou player. You familiar with this story?
No, what happened?
A former Mizzou basketball player was given.
Oh, yes. Sorry to interrupt. Yes, he got caught betting, right? On sports. He's banned from the NBA for life. Correct?
He was given the death sentence. They call it a death sentence, but essentially he can no longer play in the NBA for his entire life because he was betting on games. And supposedly, as the story goes, the most flagrant violation was, and help me on this. I'm not a bettor. I mean, are you into betting and stuff like that?
No, I haven't done sports betting since I was in high school.
Okay, it's called, a prop bet? Is that what they call it?
Yeah, which is short for proposition.
Right, and essentially what it is, it's like, okay, the guy's going to go out, and in the first 10 minutes of the game, he's going to score 4 3-point shots. Isn't that like one of the crazy things they come up with?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Goofy stuff. Well, supposedly he called one of his buddies and said, I'm not feeling real well. I don't know how well I'm going to play. And so somebody bid a prop bet against him, and they won supposedly like I don't know, a huge amount of money. But then the betting company has the right to throw it out because he didn't finish the game. He only played like 5 minutes or something like that. So that's I'm not exactly sure on the details of the story, but apparently they've nailed him several different ways that he was betting on or against his own team. And I can't remember what he was playing in the NBA, but he was bouncing back and forth between the NBA, which is the bigs, and what they call the G League, which is like the league right under the NBA. So apparently he's gone. Now, the crazy thing about this is, I'll say it once again, I don't want to sound like I'm just beating a dead horse here, but once again, you go back 10 years, and maybe not even 10 years ago, none of the major leagues would have anything to do with Las Vegas. They wanted nothing to do with Las Vegas. And they were absolutely positively, we don't want nothing to do with sports betting. It's going to corrupt our leagues. And now all of a sudden you've got the hockey team, the NHL in Las Vegas. You've got the football team in Las Vegas. And when they get done at Sacramento, I don't know if you know this crazy story. Do you know this crazy story that
No, I didn't know about the Kings or who?
No, the Oakland A's are moving to...
Oh, yeah. I watched a video on YouTube. It was they're celebrating the last season in Oakland.
Right. They're moving to Sacramento for a couple years while they build their new stadium in Las Vegas. So now, and the Cardinals and I believe the Cardinals, the Blues, the Royals, and the Chiefs are all behind the sports betting thing, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, there's clearly big money involved. And when you listen to the messaging from a guy like Jack Cardetti, he says Missourians are already betting on sports. They might have to drive across to the Kansas line or whatever to place their bets or do it with an offshore book, but they're already betting on these games. Why don't we get our share of the money?
Okay, can I make a parallel to that?
Absolutely.
Missourians are already speeding, so why do we need speed limits?
Yeah.
Missourians are already stealing stuff out of stores, so why do we need shoplifting laws, right? I mean,
you know what? There could be a whole lot more shoplifting coming once we get to story number 1, Brad.
Well, let's do number 2 on the way.
Up a notch to number 2.
I'm going to give you a quote, Brad, and I want you to tell me what you think Mayor Tishaura Jones is talking about. I have a sneaking suspicion you already know, but here's the quote. This year is a little stressful. We've got a little anxiety. What is Mayor Tishaura Jones talking specifically about, Brad?
The Cardinals not off to a good start.
You're exactly right. Talking a little bit about pitching woes, talking a little bit about, how's Mason Wynn going to do this year, Brad? Incorrect.
Sorry.
She's talking about the gaping hole that would be created if the city loses its earnings tax.
Right.
Brad.
Yes, the 1%
$26 million could be gone. This story is brought to us in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch by Austin Hugale. And he talks a little bit about how stressful it's going to be for the city, Brad. They've already stopped posting job listings on the city website because it could be so devastating, these cuts. Now, you smartened me up a few months ago, Brad. You smartened me up to the whole concept of the remote work lawsuits that are being brought by Beavis Shock. So the city's fighting this, it appears, on 2 fronts. You have the legal aspect of the suits about remote workers being taxed that don't even work in the city. And then you have legislation sponsored by State Rep Jim Murphy. He's a South County Republican, to get rid of the city earning tax altogether. So this could be a doozy for the city, Brad, and Tashara Jones is feeling a little stressed about it.
Can I give a little background on this?
And I know you know a whole lot about this.
Yes, more than I should. Years ago, I was good friends with Jack Klobnak, who now is a multimillionaire, but that's a whole other story. And he lived out in Carrollton subdivision. And that was when, this is going back, I guess, to the 90s. You can find all sorts of videos of him at all sorts of events and things like that. They formed this organization called Bridgeton Air Defense. This is when the city of St. Louis was going to take over.
Right.
Matter of fact, Eric Schmidt even contacted you once upon a time. We talked about this, and Eric Schmidt.
Yeah, that's right.
Didn't he live out there as well too,
Yeah, he's from Bridgeton, so he remembers Bridgeton Air Defense well.
Right. So the Bridgeton Air Defense was this group of citizens, and irony was that there are quite a few of the people that lived in the Carrollton subdivision who were like high muckety mucks in the advertising and public relations community. There were a couple of guys that worked at Darcy. Jack Klobnak at the time had his own advertising agency. And when the city essentially said, hey, we're going to take all your houses, they fought back and they found this little loophole in the law that stated that if you were an employee of a City of St. Louis company, but if you could prove that you were not in the city for X amount of time doing work, you didn't owe them the 1% city earnings tax. So all these executives, and they ran radio and TV ads. Hey, if you're an employee of Anheuser-Busch, or they named all these companies, and you travel for your job, you don't have to pay all that earnings. You may be entitled to. It's almost like sounds like an attorney commercial. You may be entitled to a cash payment. And what happened was all these people who were like executives at AB and all the different companies who were in downtown St. Louis or anywhere in the city of St. Louis, they thought, now hold on a minute now. Some of these executives, how it is, they travel, 80% of the time they're on the road. And
you're right.
And so they filed all these essentially requests for refunds with the city, and all they had to do was prove that they were out of town. And most of them could do it quite easily. They showed airline tickets. They showed, that they were at this conference in Atlanta and stuff like that. And essentially the city got nailed for, I think Jack told me at one point in time, like a couple $1 million, because all these, you start thinking 1%, 1%. But when you start thinking, okay, if that's 10,000 people, and
ton of money,
and they're well-paid people, and you start doing the math on that, the money starts to rack up in a hurry. So then the next thing was when everybody went remote work, then. Because, like, for example, like in the radio business, Odyssey's downtown at Tucker and Olive, nobody was working in the studios. They're all working from home. Well, Then they said, well, that's different. You still have to pay the money because you're still working for the company. And that's where Beavis Shock comes in, isn't it? He's the one that's fighting that suit where they're essentially going after, they're trying to get the money for all the COVID people who essentially who would have worked downtown, but since their downtown offices were closed. Isn't that the deal, how that went?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And also this Post-Dispatch story, Austin includes it here. He says the city's facing a lawsuit from AT&T on the separate 0.5% tax on employer payrolls. AT&T says it shouldn't have been charged on payments to remote workers.
Interesting. God, the whole thing's crazy. Okay, number one.
The number one.
A little bit of cultural enrichment, Brad, finally coming to the state of Missouri via our friends across the state in Kansas City. Are you up on this, Brad?
I'm not.
Okay. Well, a Bloomberg piece came out the other day, and Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas is welcoming migrant workers, Brad. And here's his tweet directly from his mouth, or I should say his fingers, or his staff fingers. Proud to work with my fellow mayors like Mike Johnston, CO, and New York City Mayor, he said, as we work to ensure decompression of new arriving communities and collaborations among cities, labor, nonprofits, and federal officials. Brad, these migrants that are backed up in these big cities, they just want to work. Let's bring them to Kansas City and let's let them work. Let's let them stay there for a while, hang out, maybe try to work, maybe try to get a visa, maybe try to do it the right way. What could possibly go wrong, Brad?
I can think of about 20 things, but you tell me.
Now, to your point, Brad, to the 20 things, our friend Pete Mundo in Kansas City had two guys on yesterday. He had Congressman Mark Alford and he had Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe on, talking about what a ridiculous idea this is. Mike Kehoe said the idea was, quote, crazy and unquote, ridiculous. I would suggest folks go to my website and take a listen, at least read the summary that I have up of the conversations that Pete had with these folks, talking a little bit about, again, Brad, what could possibly go wrong bringing in migrant workers to Kansas City?
And Pete's on KCMO, correct?
That's correct. You're exactly right. Yeah. So, excuse me. Also, as an aside, you teased earlier about MTG. Mark Alford said that the motion to vacate the speaker's chair is, quote, the stupidest idea I've heard in a long time. But let's get back to the migrant workers, Brad. You know the AT&T building was just sold. What a write-off it could be for the Goldman Group to have the AT&T building be a home for migrant workers, Brad. I know that Tashara Jones, with all she has going on and how much anxiety she's feeling about this earnings tax, I know that very few things would make her feel better than to outdo her friend Quentin across the state and open up the AT&T building, Brad.
We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Remember, I made the comment.
We
I
did.
said,
I thought it was a good idea, Brad. It's just sitting there, and Goldman's not going to be filling it with cubicle employees in the next 6 months. Bring some migrants in, Brad. Let's enrich our community, Brad. I know that on days where I go to a Cardinal game, and God forbid I got to park in a lot, and I know that I want to see the streets filled with folks from Venezuela and other newcomers, Brad. I want to smell them. I want to have to walk around them. When they're clogging up Clark Street, I want to have to curse and try to drive around them because they don't know our driving laws. I want to be enriched, Brad.
I'm not going to touch that. John, before we go into our next segment, I have to admit something. And
yes, sir.
I've been called on the carpet. I've been called
no, by Egbert.
No, partially by Egbert, but I've been threatened. I've been threatened with some action from the, I'm not going to say which one of the organizations that has to do with elections of people. So
okay.
What I've done is I went back into the studio and I did this last night. Are you ready to listen?
I'm ready.
Here we go.
In the heart of the heartland where the Ozarks meet the sky, there's a man with a vision, a dream that's so high. Jay Ashcroft is his name, a true son of Missouri, with a heart of gold and a spirit that's wild and free. From the small town streets to the Capitol's grand hall, he's got a humble charm that captures us all. With a voice as warm and soothing as a summer breeze, he's gonna lead us forward with honesty and ease. Jay Ashcroft, the next governor of Missouri, a down-home dreamer with a heart as pure as gold. He'll fight for our rights, he'll stand up for what's right. Jay Ashcroft, our guiding light in the cold.
There we go, John.
Remarkable, Brad. You know what? Somewhere his father is shedding a tear of pride.
His father's still alive, isn't he? Isn't his father still alive, John?
He is. Yeah, he is still.
That's what you made it sound like he's not around anymore. Like he's
no,
up there
he's still with us.
Up there in heaven or
Brad,
something like that.
That was a tremendous ditty.
I'm telling you, but you know what I'm going to have to do next.
I know, and it has to do with a guy that used to peddle some cars in mid-Missouri, doesn't it?
Mike Kehoe. Man, there's a couple different rhymes you can rhyme with that one, but we'll have to
Boy,
see.
there sure are, you know?
Okay.
We'll let that go until the next break, maybe.
Okay.
Hey, can we hear that Ashcroft song when we come back again? I think it's majestic, Brad.
Maybe I'll think about it.
Yeah, just a little teaser on the way back in, because I thought that country song, that's very.
The problem I'm gonna have now is that when Bill Eigel gets wind of this, that he's going to essentially say to me that I'm no longer welcome at his fundraisers, and he's going to probably kick me out again.
He won't say it though. He'll have Cindy Cristofanelli lay the law down on you.
Wouldn't be the first time. Okay.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?